Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Road Safety Council calling for policy guidelines for street vendors in the corporate area. Another fire at Premier Plaza in St. Andrew. The cause still unknown. And later in sports, Table Tennis Association backs decision to axe many-time champion from Commonwealth Games team. I'm Giovanni Dennis and here are the details. Up first, how does one strike a balance between taking precautions and earning a living while selling in the streets? It's something the National Road Safety Council says needs to be established in order to protect the lives of street vendors. Here's Sandy Williams with the final of a two-part special report.
Vice Chairman of the National Road Safety Council NRSC, Dr. Lucian Jones, believes there are safer alternatives for street vendors to ply their wares and still earn a living. But he insists the practice continues because of an indiscipline that is rooted in Jamaica's culture.
We have this attitude in Jamaica, man of eat a food, and therefore that translates that you do anything in order to live, which has consequences both in terms of legal things and illegal things. So it's an attitude, it's something that's gone into our culture, and it's something that we have to try and root out.
He says there must be a balance between the desire to earn money and protecting lives.
It's a delicate balance, and I don't think we have a clear answer. It's something I'd have to give some thought to. Clearly, you can't have stalls at every corner where people are selling because that would present other dangers. But I don't think the idea of somebody walking in the middle of a road and selling a bag juice here, selling a donut here, selling nuts here, is a good idea.
While street vending itself is not illegal in Jamaica, there are rules and guidelines that each vendor must adhere to. For example, each street vendor is required to get registered before receiving a license from a municipal corporation.
Therefore, selling in the streets and in other areas that have been declared no vending zones could result in confiscation of their goods by officers of the corporation. Subsequently, vendors will have to pay a hefty fine to retrieve their goods. Now, according to the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development website, vendor licenses issued by a corporation can only be used in a market for the type of goods for sale and time and date as specified in the booklet, and can only be used in the parish designated.
Dwayne Anderson is police commandant at the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation.
It is a conscientious decision from their part to understand that whilst we understand also that they have to do that, it must be done in a structured manner. And if the manner is not structured, the council will have to take action, and it might not be favorable for that vendor. So as I'm appealing to that vendor, those vendors who are currently trading in that pattern, visit the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation. We are willing to assist you to ensure that we get this thing right.
He's also making an appeal to members of the public.
It's not only on the owners of the vendor, but we have members of the public who support such activities for whatever reasons, convenience, etc. I want to also say that we are all part of this whole setup and structure, and if we want to see a better Jamaica, then the public will have to support the efforts of the council.
Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
To other news, business operators at a section of Premier Plaza in Halfway Tree St. Andrew are again tallying their losses after yet another fire in just 1 week. The blaze reportedly began early this morning about 12:15 a.m. and 3 units from the Halfway Tree Fire Brigade responded. Public Relations Officer at the Jamaica Fire Brigade, Emilia Ebanks, says investigations into the first fire are ongoing, noting that losses have so far been estimated at $200 million. Several shops were ravaged in last Thursday's fire, which was concentrated at the top of the building. This morning's fire damaged Premier Optical on the ground floor of the plaza. No one was injured. When our news team visited the scene this morning, no one was willing to speak. It's not clear what caused the two fires. There's a call this afternoon for an update from the government on the 2 additional fire stations which are slated to be built in St. Anne. The call comes from Councillor for the Claremont Division, Lambert Ware, who says residents in his division are at a disadvantage when it comes to fires.
Speaking at the latest meeting of the St. Anne Municipal Corporation, Councillor Lambert Ware said that due to the locations of the 3 fire stations in the parish, St. Anne's Bay, Ocho-Rios and Brownstown, whenever a fire occurs in his division, it takes approximately half an hour or more for the firefighters to respond.
Is there any info on the proposed fire station for Claremont? Because I don't understand, it was silent. I'm not hearing anything on the proposed fire station for Claremont.
But Acting Fire Prevention Officer in the St. Anne Fire Brigade, District Officer Kareem Williams, says plans are still afoot for the fire station to be built.
We're in the last part of our feasibility study, that's where we are now. But we have visited the site, all the information has been submitted to the brigade headquarters, so the final decision is now with them.
As for the Alexandria Fire Station,
we have Alexandria, but we're doing them one at a time. So yes, we have one last inspection with Narando before we come back to the council as it relates to Richard's Field, that is in Alexandria, Chairman.
There have been calls for a fire station in Alexandria for years, following the fire at Armadale and the fire which was started by detainees at the Alexandria Police lockup in September last year. Units from Brownstown and St. Anne's Bay had to be called in. In the meantime, at least 2 fire stations will be commissioned into operation later this year. Local Government Minister Desmond McKenzie committed to handing over the new Port Maria Fire Station in St. Mary by year-end. The fire station was abandoned in 2006.
The firefighters have endured hardships since they have been relocated. And it is our responsibility. We have completed the work on the Montego Bay Fire Station. And very shortly, we'll be opening the new fire station in Yallas in St. Thomas. And we want to complete the circle of fire stations by dealing with the one here in Port Maria, which is long overdue.
Mr. McKenzie was speaking at a town hall in St. Mary last week. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
A third person has died from the fatal accident on the Landover Main Road on Sunday. The deceased has been identified as 20-year-old Khadija Campbell of a Brownstown address. She died this morning at the St. Anne's Bay Hospital. Reports are that about 8:30 Sunday morning, a minibus was traveling towards Ocho-Rios on the Landover Main Road. A coaster bus transporting workers of the Electoral Office of Jamaica was traveling in the opposite direction towards St. James when they collided. 2 persons from the crash died on Sunday, including the driver of the minibus. And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back. We're continuing the news. Stop selling driver's licenses. Transport Minister Audley Shaw again vowing to stamp out the practice, this time by sweetening the appeal to motor vehicle examiners. Krista Campbell explains.
The new Road Traffic Act is one step away from becoming law now that it's with the Senate. Replacing the old Act of 1938, the new legislation brings with it tougher penalties for traffic offences, but also new provisions to stop certain corrupt practices at state agencies that govern the transportation sector.
Average selling price $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 to get a driver's license. Okay? Part of that has ended up 20% of our drivers in Jamaica are illiterate.
Transport Minister Audley Shaw says they help cause some of the motor vehicle crashes which, up to July 26, have claimed 272 lives.
People must go, do their tests, get their licenses legitimately so that they can be a part of safe driving on the road.
Motor vehicle examiners are being targeted to help stop the illegal practice.
When I look at the compensation that is paid to examiners, $120,000 a month, plus another 70 or so, $80,000. Round it off at $200,000 a month. That can't continue. The pay to examiners will have to be significantly increased.
But here's the catch.
Part of the return of that significant increase in their salaries is the elimination of selling of driver's licenses.
Krista Campbell, TVJ News.
In the meantime, the National Integrity Action is this afternoon calling on the National Solid Waste Management Authority, NSWMA, to come clean on what's the real problem impacting the timely disposal of garbage by the state-run entity. Findings from the Auditor General's performance report gave the NSWMA a failing grade. In defense, Audley Gordon, Executive Director of the NSWMA, blames the lack of timely garbage collection on inadequate resources. But Professor Trevor Monroe, Principal Director of the National Integrity Action, is not convinced. Mr. Monroe is now demanding more clarity.
So I would urge that the NSWMA, if not in breach, it's actually in fulfillment of transparency, would make public its comprehensive needs analysis or a summary of it, indicating where the gaps are, what it has received from the public purse, and what it needs to get. We can then make a judgment as to whether to say, Minister, look, you need to do better, or we need to say to Dennis and Audley, you need to do better in what you have.
And for a look at the business world, here's Cody Barrett.
Total funds under management by non-deposit taking financial institutions were estimated at $1.93 trillion in 2021. According to the Economic and Social Survey, the figure increased by 6.7% compared with the end of 2020. Total assets held by these groups amounted to $1.19 trillion, reflecting a 9.3% increase. Securities firms accounted for 70% of funds under management from non-deposit taking institutions. Nestle hiked its prices by 6.5% in the first half of 2022 as it grapples with an unprecedented rise in cost. The world's largest food company raised its prices the most in North America with a 9.8% increase, followed by Latin America at 9.4%. Nestle said rising cost for commodities, packaging, freight and energy weighed on the company's operating profit margin. It had already increased prices by 3.1% in the last 3 months of 2021. That's it for the Business Minute. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
And here's Sandy Williams with the top regional and international stories.
In regional news, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, says as global financial conditions tighten, commodity prices reverse upward trend, and inflationary pressures persist, the winds are shifting. This even as economies of Latin America and the Caribbean continue their strong post-pandemic rebound. According to the IMF, year-on-year growth reached 2.8% in the first quarter, compared to an average of 1.7% in the years preceding the pandemic, and high-frequency indicators point to continued momentum in the second quarter. The IMF said Caribbean economies are behind in their recovery as tourism is yet to return to pre-pandemic levels despite the recent rebounds. Meanwhile, Central America, Panama, and Dominican Republic have already surpassed their pre-pandemic output levels, driven by the rapid recovery in the United States through strong exports and remittances inflows as well as supportive policies. On the international scene, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has inspected the damage and destruction in Abra on Thursday morning, a day after a powerful 7.0 magnitude earthquake hit the Philippines. Power has been restored in the majority of areas, but access to drinkable water remains a problem. More than 4,900 families, or roughly 21,000 people, have been impacted by the quake. 5 people were killed and 130 were injured, according to the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Center. The cost of the damage to infrastructure was estimated at 38.3 billion pesos in the country's northern region of Ilocos. The city of Abra is in the northern part of Luzon province, the biggest island of the Philippines. Philippines. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Sandy Williams.
And we now head to a quick break. When we come back, Renardo Brown will have the midday sports.